Well, President Trump called it momentous and historic, and he said that Neil Gorsuch will be a truly great Supreme Court justice as the Colorado judge took the oath on Monday in the Rose Garden at the White House. President Trump has also been using actions rather than words in regard to his foreign policy. In the last few days, he has sanctioned a missile strike on an airbase in Syria, and he's moved a US destroyer to waters just off the Korean Peninsula. Here with us to talk through the week in politics is Tom Bevan, editor of the website Real Clear Politics. Hello, Tom.
Hi, Rod. How are you?
Very well. It's good to have you with us. And Patrick Basham from the Democracy Institute, the politically independent think tank in Washington. Hello, Patrick.
Hi, Rod. Great to be with you again.
Good to have you with us. Well, it's great. Everybody's here. Patrick, let's start with you. Neil Gorsuch confirmed as a Supreme Court justice. And many would say that this is, well, and everybody would say this is the end of an incredibly long fight. Have the Republicans won hands down? Is there any shred of dignity that the Democrats can save from this?
Well, I mean, the Democrats fought from their point of view the good fight. I mean, first with Garland's nomination, they did what they could to put pressure on the Republicans. It was unlikely to work. It didn't work. And, they've opposed Gorsuch about as aggressively as they could. But again, it was unlikely in the end to work. But this is a momentous day, I should say, for President Trump. And all we need to know about the importance of today is what we heard from President Obama, and if memory serves, from then candidate Hillary Clinton last year, which was this election was so important in no small part, perhaps in largest part, because the next president would get to choose probably 2, maybe 3 Supreme Court justices. So Trump's ability to finally get his man on the court, and the first of perhaps 2 or 3 men or women, means that he has produced perhaps the most consequential moment of his presidency, and the one that will satisfy, if not all of the blue-collar voters who turned out for him last November, but a lot of the Republican base, and sets him up, in pretty good shape going forward.
Tom, would you generally agree with that? Is this the most important thing that President Trump has done yet?
I think so, and this was one of the things that he, I think, more importantly than his base, this has really bought him goodwill, not only in the campaign when he released this list of 20 judges, but the nomination itself among the Republican establishment, Republican elite. This is one of Judge Gorsuch is very well respected, and so I think it is probably his most consequential victory thus far. I would also say I think the conventional wisdom heading into this is that Democrats would not go to the mat, would not force a filibuster on Gorsuch because he's seen as sort of being within the mainstream. He was approved by the ABA, and that to do that, and because he was replacing Scalia on the court, who was one of the sort of pillars of the conservative court, that they would wait and utilize their leverage on the next pick, which is most likely, if you look at the court and the age of the members involved, will be either Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a liberal of some kind, or Anthony Kennedy, who's often seen as a swing vote. And now they've lost that leverage. And now, given what's transpired, they will be completely helpless to stop the next nominee. And that could be someone who alters the court in a monumental way for decades moving forward.
I said at the beginning that the Republicans have done away with 2 Senate traditions. One was the idea that you always give a hearing to the president's nominee for the Supreme Court, and they denied a hearing to Judge Merrick Garland last year. The second, of course, is that it takes 60 votes in the Senate to confirm a Supreme Court justice. Tom, are these now gone forever? Would the Democrats in a similar position feel free to block any Republican president's nominee if they had the firepower to do it?
Yes, I think they would. And I think that was a gamble on the part of Republicans to say, listen, we're going to stick to our guns. And because it was Antonin Scalia, I think they found the footing to be able to do that and to last through the election. If Trump had not won, they could have ended up with someone who's significantly more liberal than Merrick Garland if Hillary Clinton decided to make a new nominee. So I think Democrats will do that. As far as the filibuster goes, filibustering judges was not always Senate tradition. It is a relatively new thing based on how partisan Washington has become. So, the Democrats did away with the filibuster of elected federal judges, just not the Supreme Court. What Republicans have done is remove the restriction on the Supreme Court as well. What's left, though, is there's still a filibuster for legislative items. And that, I think everybody, Mitch McConnell and Republicans, have said that is not going anywhere. I think both sides would see that as truly altering the institution of the Senate if they were to strip that away. And I don't think anybody right now has the stomach to do that.
Yeah. Let's look again at Judge Gorsuch. The court also, Patrick, fair to say that this idea of a completely politically balanced court is also a bit modern, isn't it? If the court ends up with a predominantly conservative bench, aren't judges, by their very nature, innately conservative anyway?
They are, or sort of one should hope they are, in the sense that they are not looking for reasons to massage the Constitution. They're looking for reasons to protect the Constitution. But, there are generational shifts. I mean, you had from FDR until well into Reagan's presidency, you had crudely stated a liberal majority of a fair size, of significance. And then since Reagan until fairly recently, arguably with Scalia's death last year, you had a not guaranteed, but a reasonably significant conservative majority. And it looks as if where we have been with this deadlock on not all, but a number of major issues, the 4-4 deadlock, was sort of an interruption. And that because of Trump's election, the conservative majority will be back in the ascendancy. And obviously it depends on retirements and, God forbid, more deaths of justices. Mm-hmm. But Trump, if he's reelected, he may be able to establish the continuation of that conservative majority for quite some time, because the new justice of today, he's, I believe, 49 years old, and if Trump decides to go with quote unquote younger justices, I mean, these characters they can be around for a very long time.
Well, let's turn away to foreign policy. And Mr. Trump faced his first foreign policy challenge of any real magnitude last week when the chemical attack was carried out, and he reacted to it. Tommy reacted to it quite emotionally, but also very clearly with the missile attack. Generally speaking, would you say that the launch of these cruise missiles into Syria against that airfield enjoyed majority support in Congress?
I would say, that it did. You had, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer supporting the president. You had folks, Democrats, who have basically opposed everything that he's done since he got into office, sort of grudgingly, I think, supporting the policy. And you did also have Republicans who, Rand Paul and some of these others who were opposed to any sort of action in Syria, criticizing. But I think more broadly, it was supported. The question is, and this is to your point, Rod, which is why the change of heart from Trump? Because he did react emotionally to these pictures and called them the beautiful babies. But the Trump administration says, look, this was a clear violation, a chemical weapons attack, a clear violation of international standards, and punishment was needed, and therefore they went ahead. And in that sense, Trump did take decisive action. The question is now, what comes next? Was this an actual shift in policy? The administration has been saying for the past few days that no, their military posture towards Syria has not changed.
And the question, of course, Tom, is whether or not they support the removal of Assad, and that's not clear.
Well, not everybody's been singing from the same sheet of music. It is true, but I think by and large, you saw Rex Tillerson on the Sunday shows said, their regime change is not. They are not supporting regime change in Syria right now, and they're not ruling out the fact that more may need to be done there. But I don't think for those who were hoping that Trump was going to go back on all of his campaign promises and suddenly shift back to the George W. Bush foreign policy or Barack Obama policy, in particular the Bush policy that he criticized so vehemently during the campaign. I don't think that's where this is headed, but we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah. Patrick, maybe a quick bit of explanation. Why were the president's most vocal critics on his right? Why were they people like Rand Paul who didn't approve of what he did in Syria?
Because the likes of Rand Paul have always opposed direct military intervention in Syria. They think it's a civil war that America is best out of. And they also assumed, unlike many of his critics further to the left or within the Republican Party even, that Trump was actually serious when he said that America should be less involved in the Middle East and more generally around the world. So they think on principle it's a mistake, and they also are trying to, from their point of view, rein him in and not let him slip away to the more establishment Republican foreign policy, worldview of the last 10 or 15 years. They're very concerned that the neocons may surprisingly, if not have captured Trump, may have a moment where they can seize the initiative with Trump.
And by the neocons, you mean some of the people who surrounded George W. Bush?
Correct.
So those people who support a very muscular foreign policy backed up by military action if need be.
Yes, and especially in the Middle East, where they believe that the removal of dictators like Assad, like Saddam Hussein, etc., can and should and perhaps will lead to a democratic politics that will benefit not only that population, those citizens, but also the United States.
Tom, where has this left the Democrats? Are they looking for a position to take now on Syria, maybe more than they were, or a position to take on North Korea more than they were?
Yeah, I would just add one more point to Patrick. This has now re-energized the debate within Congress about the authorization of military force. Some of Trump's critics say that what the action that he took was unconstitutional, right? That the president needs to go to Congress to get the authority to go to war. Now Trump's administration has said, look, he was within his rights, given the nature of the circumstances. But there are members of the Democratic caucus and the Republican caucus who believe very strongly that Congress has sort of abdicated its responsibility here, and that the president needs to come to Congress and get authorization before he's launching missile strikes abroad. So that's another piece of the equation. As far as where Democrats go, I think Democrats, as I said, grudgingly support the policy. They're not sure about his motives, and they are asking the question of, what is the strategy here? Was this simply a one-off attack? Was it impulsive? Is there a larger grand strategy? If so, what is that strategy, not only within Syria itself, but more broadly? You mentioned North Korea and some of these other places in the world. Democrats want to know what the Trump administration, what their vision is. And quite frankly, some Republicans want to know that as well. And again, we don't have the answers to that yet, and we'll know more as this progresses. But it's a terribly complex situation, and not one that's going to be solved certainly overnight or within the next week or month.
No, and just a further point of clarification, Tom. Do you remember when President Clinton organized a missile strike in Sudan after the attack on the embassy in Nairobi in 1998? He didn't ask for approval, did he? He didn't ask for congressional approval to do that.
No, and generally speaking, presidents have not asked for approval for things. They are able to justify this sort of action, through executive action. But again, that is a debate that I think Congress. Remember, when Barack Obama was talking about doing this after the first Syrian chemical attack in 2013, there was a debate. He decided to go to Congress. He found out he was going to lose that fight in Congress, and decided to change his mind about the attack, about taking action in Syria. Congress wants its prerogatives back. I think there are plenty of members of Congress who do. And there are plenty of them who are eager to have this fight, even if the executive isn't as eager to reopen that discussion.
And I've left, if you like, the good bit till the end, because that kind of constrains us a little bit. Patrick, is Steve Bannon on his way out as the president's trusted confidant in the White House?
I don't think so. At least I think it's too soon to be confident that that's the case. I mean, the fact that he lost his place on the National Security Council, it is important because it does, at least in a formal sense, reduce his influence in that sphere. But what it reflects is the change in National Security Advisor, in February when General Flynn resigned and his successor, General McMaster, came in. He insisted to Trump, impressed upon Trump successfully, that the directors of the CIA, etc., needed to be where they normally are on that council, and as in the professional military intelligence people. And the likes of Steve Bannon didn't belong there in their place. Trump agreed, whether reluctantly or not, he agreed. And we also have seen Flynn's original deputy, Katie McFarland, the former Fox News analyst, also has now moved on because McMaster wanted his own people. So it's more about the new man, the new National Security Advisor, getting his team in place, I think, than it is a question of Steve Bannon is clearly on the exit ramp. Right,
and I'll give the last word to Tom. The other way, of course, Tom, it's being portrayed as the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, continues on his ascendancy, and he's more of a globalist, and Steve Bannon is a nationalist and comes from the extreme right and all that kind of thing. Is it too simple to see it that way?
Perhaps not. I mean, listen, the one thing that we do know, even if you discount some of the reporting as conjecture and rumor and third-hand innuendo, the one thing that is clear is that there's plenty of palace intrigue going on. There are plenty of factions within the Trump White House that are constantly jockeying for position, and constantly there's backbiting and there's movement. We've heard. I mean, a day or two doesn't go by without a story that Reince Priebus is on his way out, or we had a report that Bannon was ready to leave but was convinced to stay. He was going to quit. We had a story saying Trump basically called Kushner, and the Priebus had a meeting with Kushner and Bannon, and Trump told him basically knock it off and bury the hatchet. Now, the administration often portrays this as a sign of strength, that they've got these different viewpoints that are all being brought to the president, but I think by and large it creates a lot of noise and a lot of distraction for the White House, because there is just so much of this palace intrigue that continues to go on and get leaked to the press.
And will do for the next week too, I'm sure, keeping us in business. Thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
Bye-bye, Patrick. So we heard from Tom Bevan, the editor of Real Clear Politics, and Patrick Basham.